Hello, and welcome to Leashing Barguests. I am, as ever, Fishy, and this is Mappa Monday, slightly earlier than usual, so I was made a liar of myself on Emerald stream on Saturday when I said that if I streamed a Mappa Monday this week, it would be likely to be later, sort of after Druttercup's evening stream, but insomnia has been bugging me for the last couple of weeks, and last night it caught up to me and I got what for me was an early night, which was about 3 a.m. But 3 a.m. is still 5 hours earlier than I am supposed to go to bed because my day job is a night job, blah, 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 all that nonsense. So I'm up and around this afternoon when I really shouldn't be, and so Mappa Monday. Doesn't mean I won't do one at about 10 o'clock-ish this evening, but it also doesn't mean that I will. And hello, Alia. So, today, not something different, but at the same time, something different. I'm all set here. I've got a huge mug of coffee. I've got, once I hit play again, Joe Bonamassa in my left ear, which hopefully is not going out over stream, since I have no license to play it over the stream. And I'm going to make a map. Well, no shock there on a Mappa Monday stream. I'm going to make a city map, no shock if you bother to read the title, and it's going to be for the Echoes of Legend actual play campaign that we started this month, running on the first Tuesday of every month. Hopefully there might be some jiggling of schedules to make things work with players, but that's the goal, roughly, first Tuesday of every month. So in the first session, we introduced our characters as they sailed across the seas from Kundheim. They didn't all come from Kundheim, but the ship was coming from Kundheim up to Goredrasal, the new frontier. And they're arriving next session in Calwyn's Bay, gateway to the new frontier. So I don't need a map of the whole of Calwyn's Bay to run that, but what would be useful is if I had a map of just the dock area, the port where they're coming in, so that I can give them something to look at as a visual cue when we start playing that. Using my usual tactic, my plan is to go big and essentially do this on a city scale map, but at a level where I can chop out that section and use it as an exported battle map or adventure map without the need to draw one fresh for that region, because I don't trust my mapping skills to get it to look the same as the city version, and vice versa. So that's my plan, is to make a start on Calwyn's Bay, probably map out the basic shape of the city and map that dock area. What's going to be different with this stream is I'm actually starting it from the very beginnings. So we will see. Sorry about this. Hang on. I'm just going to mute myself for a second while I try and clear my throat. Hopefully that's a little bit better. So yeah, normally I start a map up and then I come onto the stream and I do some work on it. This is partly because I have these huge insecurities. And I don't like those early moments of a map are when I'm most likely to have done something wrong. So, when you realise that you've set your mapping your mapping area at the wrong size and you're actually going to need it to be bigger, or else your map is just going to be a tiny thing in the middle and you've got a big, huge space around the outside. And I like to go through those bits on my own off stream normally, and when I'm happy with it, then bring that onto the stream and carry on working on it. But today I'm actually going to start from the beginning. So, on the screen at the moment, we can see, and I will just swap myself over to a version where less of me is in the way of it. We can see a city map. Well, it's a town map, in fact. Now, this map is the map of River Fork. River Fork is about halfway up the river between Calwyn's Bay and Redhelm's Peak in the area that they're adventuring in, or the area that they're coming to. The goal is for the campaign to move up to the peak's edge, which River Fork can be viewed as like the southern edge of the peak's edge. So it's moving up into the peak's edge and up to where the three cities are: Redhelm's Peak, North Peak, and East Peak. And spoilers, the overall campaign bad guys will be the Merchant Council of North Peak. Don't tell anyone. The only person watching this is one of the players. Don't tell the players. So yeah, there are political rivalries between Red Helm's Peak and North Peak. So the idea is to lean into that and do some sort of political gaming based around that, but not exclusively, because the Peak's Edge is also a region of dungeoneering. It was originally created for dungeoneering environments, and unfortunately, being me, I just added way too much to the environment and came up with this cool place with these political maneuverings going on that have nothing to do with going down a dungeon, killing a goblin, and nicking his treasure. So that's where we're going, and inevitably the player characters are going to pass through River Fork here, halfway up the river, on their way up to Red Helm's Peak. So it's going to be a little bit of adventuring around Calwyn's Bay, then get a job that takes them upriver to River Fork, a little bit of adventuring there, then a job that takes them upriver to Red Helm's Peak, and we'll carry on from there. So this is a bit long term before we reach Red Helm's Peak, and even really a little bit long term before we reach River Fork. But the reason this map is on here at the moment is a couple of reasons. Firstly, River Fork was my first attempt at mapping Red Helm's Peak. As I said, mistakes can be made. And I realised it was just way too small. It was nowhere near big enough to be the city of Red Helm's Peak. It was a town scale, not a city scale. So what I did is I actually flipped the map. I was originally drawing it the other way up. And I flipped the map, added the extra fork in to get the positioning right, and I converted it to be used as the map of River Fork. Which is a nice example of the fact that if you do get something wrong in your map, but it's only wrong for the context, not actually that the map is wrong, reuse it. Reuse, recycle, all that nonsense. So this is the map of River Fork. And the reason it's up here is because this is the mapping style I'm using for towns in this setting. And so it's an example of what we're going to be looking at. So this mapping style was inspired apparently by the D&D 3.5 supplement Cityscape. The maps in which I think must have been originally inspired by the silhouette mapping style that was used in a lot of second edition books, such as Forgotten Realms Adventures. And what they did with Cityscape is obviously, and with this, is obviously they converted that black and white silhouette map, which was just little square blocks for buildings, into a nice full colour mapping style. I'm assuming they did that in Cityscape. I don't think I own that book. I might do, but I don't remember reading it. And I've been using this style since it came out because I just really like it. And this is not a new style. This came out in the January issue of the 2009 Cartographer's Annual. So this is not a new style by any stretch of the imagination. I've been using it for a long time. I had to go hunting to find out exactly when it came out, and I started with, okay, well, I published Obsession in 2012, and I was already working on Chthona for Obsession, so I'd drawn maps using this style by 2012, so I started with 2011 and worked back until I found it, and there it was in January 2009. One of the things I like about this is it's a nice, clean style. It uses exactly the same building tools as everything else, but they have been sort of like tweaked slightly, so that instead of drawing roofs and things like that, you just get a nice rectangle in the different colours for the buildings, but with the 3D effects on it. And it looks kind of cool. So I'm very fond of that. There is a black and white version of this style as well that they did later on, which is also very good. So if I do any maps that aren't in this style for the Chthona setting, they're likely to be using the black and white version of the same style, so they'll still kind of match. But the key ones, the important ones, are the early ones I'm doing in this style. It works with City Designer, but City Designer is not required for it. You can use just Campaign Cartographer 3+ for it. And of course, it was originally released for CC3, not 3+, and has since been updated since 3+, which was some years ago now that we went to 3+, and they went back and rather than just leaving the old volumes, they went back and they updated each of them to work with the new features of 3+, which was really nice. We like that, especially since 3+ is much, much faster and easier on your PC's resources than 3 was. doing the same thing. When it first came out, I actually had 3 and 3 Plus installed at the same time on the PC so that I could compare them. And doing anything in 3 Plus was much, much faster. The machine responded much faster than it did in 3 for the same map, which was really nice to see. But that's ancient history now. So this is what we've got, our Fantasy City pack. That includes a 3-page PDF mapping guide, which we will be using today. 2 example maps, a new template wizard, a new drawing style, 45 new drawing tools, 3 new catalogs including 62 new symbols, 4 new CD3 house settings, 6 new CD3 street settings, 2 effect settings, and 3 new filter textures. So that's what comes with that volume. That you can't get that issue on its own anymore. In fact, you never could, because this is part of the annual, and by definition, the annual is bought yearly. So that's part of the Volume 3 annual. So there are, I think there's actually 13. It's one of the ones where they gave a bonus issues as part of that. And you can go to Pro Fantasy's website, buy that, and download all of those. There's also an overland, quite nice overland mapping style, some stuff on mapping sailing ships, a larger scale overland style, some stuff on making medieval strip maps, which is kind of cool, a thing on ornamentation, some advice on printing and exporting your maps. A little bit out of date now because it's from 2009 and, times and technology change, obviously. A thing on making Napoleonic battle, war, battle maps styles. Some guidelines on working with macros, modern atlas style, military units for making, modern war game type stuff. Some side view stuff, and then the final bonus issue was some battle tiles that could be printed out to just lay on your table and use when mapping. But the Fantasy Cities one is the one that we are interested in because that's the style that we are using. So let's have a look at that. Let's actually have a quick look at what it is we're going to be mapping. So this is the area around Calwin's Bay. This is 15 miles to the hex. Our players have just arrived in Calwin's Bay, having sailed up the 60 miles roughly of that bay until they reach the city. And at the beginning of the next session, they're going to be docking in that city. Hello, Chrono. Welcome aboard. Sorry I didn't notice you when you first popped in. I don't know how long you've been there, but hello anyway. Now I've got 2 of my players in chat, so definitely need to avoid spoilers. So that gives us an idea of the basic, the surroundings for the city, which are obviously going to be important when we start mapping the city as to how it's going to look. So we'll go back for the moment to the River Fork map. I'm going to replace that because I'm going to hit the new map button. We won't save any changes because I haven't made anything. It's registering changes because I've zoomed in and out, but I haven't actually made any on that map. Right, and that brings us up to the new drawing wizard. Well, I'm making a map that I'm going to present to you at the beginning of the next session, so I don't think that there's much in the way of spoilers that I can give, apart from the one I already did about that we don't talk about. So this is obviously going to be a city map, so we select cities for starters, and we have a choice here of picking a predefined template or deciding the settings myself. So since I'm starting from the beginning, I'm going to talk through this process because normally I already have this bit done before we get to a stream. So let's have a look at the mapping guide and see what that advises me for a map. So, start out as usual using the new drawing wizard. Choose map type cities, map style annual fantasy cities, and the options decide your own setting. Okay. For their example map, they're using 2000 by 1600. That's not really a large area for a city, so I'm going to double that and hope that's a good size for Calwin's Bay. And we'll see how that goes. If not, I can actually manually... Normally, if I realize early enough that I've made the mistake of not having enough space, then I will just restart. But you can actually change the size of the canvas after the fact. So if it turns out that's not big enough, I can make it bigger afterwards. So we are on cities. We are deciding the settings myself. We will pick our annual Fantasy Cities style. As you can see, I have a lot of map styles here. This is because I own all, I think around 19 or 20 volumes of the annual by now, plus I think 6 I've forgotten the word, but mapping style collections. Symbol styles, that's the word, the word they use. Yeah, so not all of them contain city map styles, but even so, there's an awful lot of city map styles there. We've got 2 options for the annual Fantasy Cities. There's one for if you don't have City Designer, and there's one for if you do. And obviously I have City Designer, so I'm using the version that leans into the City Designer specific tools. We'll hit next. And this is where we put in our size. Now, they were using 2000 by 1600. I am going to double that, so I'm going to go 4000 by 3200. That should be a good size, I hope. Now, if you do a little bit of hunting around on the internet, you can actually find some pretty good data on population densities and medieval city sizes and things like that, and get an idea of how big an area a city should be based on the population you want for it. I'm not going to say that I've never done that. I have been known to do those maths, to work that out, but I'm not going to today. I'm just going to pick a size and start mapping. Map title, we may as well give it a map title. That doesn't really do a great deal, unless I choose to insert it. But it's there. It's stored into the map. So next, we get to choose our map background. I'm going to use the default map background for this so that it matches the other maps. But I could change that. This is just a solid in this sort of yellowy semi-parchment type color. Oh, look at that. We're getting AutoMod blocking things for me already. Thank you, AutoMod. Don't mind if I do. We'll get rid of that. We don't want to buy any thingies. Thank you. Okay. So I could change this to a different background if I wanted, but I'm just going to leave it as it is. Likewise, I can put a grid overlay on it. Now, I am going to put a grid overlay on it. I'm going to set this as a square grid with no labels, because I don't want labels on it. And I am going to use, because I tend to do this for city maps, I am going to use a 50-foot grid for this. So in terms of traditional gaming maps, but adventure maps, I give the air quotes there because Dungeons and Dragons, for example, didn't officially use them until the release of 3rd edition in the year 2000. So, it's been going since the 1970s. There's been an awful lot of D&D before battle maps became a standardized thing. But when they did come in, D&D popularized the 5-foot grid. Kind of already existed, but it was certainly by no means the big deal that it is today. So what I tend to work on for cities is to use 10 times that, 50-foot grid, so that it matches nicely when I put an overlay of 5-foot grid on it for adventure map exports, and it just gives me a vague idea of where we're going with things. On a 50-foot grid, you're not getting much in the way of your buildings per square, to be honest, because obviously if you think about the size of a building, you might get a few buildings into a square if they're small buildings, or you might have one large building that actually takes up a couple of squares. But it gives us an idea if we have that grid anyway. So we're going with a 50-foot grid on this. I'll apply that. The next tab on here, we're not going to be using. This is for multiple floors. Now, usually this applies obviously to things like buildings, castles, dungeons, so forth, where you might have multiple levels that you can link between the maps. You could do that for city. You could have a multi-level city, theoretically. In fact, I have got a map of a multi-level city, but I didn't use this for that. I just used additional layers to filter out the other layers rather than using multiple maps. But you can do multiple levels for that if you want to. And then we will finish, and that will give us our blank map to work with. It will ask us to save this somewhere. So we will be saving this in my OCD materials folder. To be precise, we will be putting it in Fantasy Legends of the First Chthona, and we will save it there as calwinsbay.fcw. And there we go. There is our starting map. Well, that message never showed up because AutoMod blocked it, and then I just denied it. So first glance, this looks kind of like maybe we're doing a dungeon map because we've got our nice square grid on our screen here. But obviously what we're actually doing is a city map, and a port city at that. So important first step might be we're going to need some water here. So let's look at the terrain tools and find water, because we're bound to have water. There we go. We've got smooth or default. Now the default is fractal. Given a choice, I'll go with fractal water most of the time, because unless it's an artificially modified bit of coastline, the odds are most coastline is not really particularly smooth. If you zoom in far enough, it looks smooth mostly. But we're not zoomed in that far here, are we? So let's go with, we'll go with our default water. And what we'll do, we know that Calwin's Bay is on the mouth of a river. So we're going to start the river, and we know that Calwin's Bay also is on the east bank of the river. So I want the river on the west side of the map, really. So I'm going to start up here, and I'm going to bring this down to represent our river coming in, and we're going to ease this out until we hit the edge of the map. Once we've hit the edge of the map, the fractal doesn't matter anymore, because it will follow the map edge until I come back off the map. So we don't get silly wavy lines that look silly at the end of the at the edge of the map, unless you refractalize after the fact, in which case you will, and you'll have to delete those extra points. And then we will come back up to about here, and we'll have our coast coming down like this. And again, then we will ease up in, and we're hoping that this is going to be a big enough river. These are 50-foot squares, so it's not bad. Let's pick a fairly narrow looking point here. So yeah, we're 230 foot across there. So that's going to, this needs to be navigable by boat, of course, by ships. So 230 feet across should give us something that's nicely navigable. We know from the Calwin's Bay area map that there is a bridge. So a decision I need to make now is, obviously the map, this map is not accurate, because each of these hexes is 15 miles. Looking at this, you know, the bridge is 15 miles away from the city. The city itself takes up about 16 miles. It's about 16 miles wide. That's obviously not the way things are. This is representative. So a decision that we need to make is this bridge actually somewhat upriver, as the map could lead us to believe, with a road then leading into Calwin's Bay, or is the bridge actually a part of Calwin's Bay itself? And the decision I'm going to make on this one, I think that the bridge is upriver, and I think it's not on this map. So I think instead we're going to have a road leading up the river to the bridge. And this first section of the river, therefore, is going to be navigable without worrying about needing to be able to get through a bridge. It's not marked on that map, but it's entirely possible that there's some sort of station on the bridge, at the bridge, maybe a loading and unloading facility, so that ships that can't make it past the bridge can unload there and then load those goods onto a ship that's come downriver from the other end, so it swaps over. That's something that, under other circumstances, maybe would be done in Calwin's Bay. So you could see goods arriving in Calwin's Bay and then transferring to ships that are going upriver. Here, what we're doing is we're effectively having an outpost of Calwin's Bay up by the bridge and doing it there instead. And I think that it's inefficient, but I think that represents quite nicely. It works with the fact that Calwin's Bay grew organically out of a couple of settlements along this coastline, which just as they grew, merged into a single thing. So maybe it was 3 settlements originally, one where the river crossing is, 2 down on the coast, and they're all now Calwin's Bay, but one of them is geographically separated from the other 2. So let's get our roads. We will get a 10-foot dirt road, and we will have our road coming down following the river from here, and this will be the main trade route going up. And what I'm going to do for the moment is I'm going to follow the river. I'll probably edit this later, but for the moment I'm going to have this road come all the way down and follow the coastline all the way around. And I may change elements of this. I may delete portions of it, break it and delete portions of it. But in my head, for now, what I'm doing is I'm showing where this road was, or where this road would be, were there no city. I'm also going to turn the effects on at this point, because that grid is too visible right now. I'm going to adjust the grid sheet. The transparency's turned off. Right, I'm going to turn on the transparency. Didn't really make a lot of difference. Let's edit that transparency. What is it set to? It's set to 75% opacity. I'm going to swap that down to 50% opacity so that the grid is less in your face. I may even turn it down less than that. You never know. So what we've got now, we've got our section of coastline. I'm going to quickly save this. And we've got our road that shows where the road would be if we didn't have a city here. The simplest way to deal with that road when building a city over the top is just literally to draw over it. The only reason I would break that, and I may need to do that, I might break that and chop sections out of it if I need there to be a gap, essentially. But things like, for example, we might have a town square that neatly sits over the top of that road and breaks the road up, but doesn't require me to get rid of the road. And that would work absolutely fine. Let's see how our PDF mapping guide now advises us to continue, because it's going to be slightly different to the way I'm doing it, I suspect. So it does say do your rivers and coast. Next, there we go. We have our river and coast there. Now, how have they done it? Use the default tool to add coastal waters to your map, perhaps a wide river. Stream tools are useful to create smaller tributaries to a river. So we've got stream tools that I can add in as streams as well. That's quite neat. So it now suggests city outline and wall. Now, this is one of those decisions. Does Calwin's Bay have a wall? This is a frontier region, but at the same time, this is the safe part. You go north, it becomes unsafe, but this part is actually fairly safe. So I suspect that Calwin's Bay doesn't have much of a wall. What I might do is give it an interior wall or two that possibly represent where the original settlements from Calwin's Bay do have walls, or did have walls, and remnants of those walls still exist, but the city has grown up around them. This is something you find quite a lot, certainly here in the UK, in cities where you'll find a city wall inside a larger settlement, and that marks where the original city was back in the day when it still needed a wall. And then things just grew up outside it, and it gives it a nice kind of organic kind of feel. And there are 2 locations where I might do that with this. I did that in Axe, for example. My Port Sontras map in Axe actually does have 3 locations which are representative of the history of the city. Now I've got an interior wall where it's grown up outside the wall, and I've got an area which was originally a separate fishing village, which the city just overwhelmed. But that's all marked up in the districts, and you can see in the way that the buildings have been designed that this has an internal continuity to it, even though it's actually part of the larger city. So thinking that way can make your city certainly feel better. So if your city has a wall, it's easiest to draw it at this point. It perfectly serves this purpose, the purpose of defining the general outline of the city. I kind of know what the general outline of my city is likely to be, in as much as I know that it's going to be in this corner, essentially. I may have some bits on this side of the river. You never know. But the main city is certainly over on this side. There may be a smaller district on that side where it's spread. I think the most defining features of this city are certainly going to be the port and the location of the two original settlements. So I'm just going to open up the keep, where I keep a lot of information on Obsession and Chthona. And we will head down and we will take a quick look at our notes for the city of Calwin's Bay. So, Gredrosol. Now, it's not actually officially part of the Peak's Edge, but I may have included it in the Peak's Edge, I think, for purposes of this write-up. Oh, it's 4 cities. I always forget South Peak for some reason when I'm talking about the cities. Running south from the Three Peak Mountains to Calwin's Bay, the Tranthal forms the heart of civilization on Gredrosol, But interestingly, it does not know my write-up. When I was doing playtesty stuff with this before, years ago, I was very much doing it in the Peak's Edge region proper in the north, and Calwin's Bay was on the map and in the history, but I hadn't really got any detail on it. So it looks like there's not a lot of detail to be included, apart from in the sort of in the basic history, which includes the notes on the refounding. So my notes on refounding, we have got, so the first settlement is Newton in Calwin's Bay. That was formed 207 years ago. And then 167 years ago, it merged with the neighbouring Red Wharf and was renamed Calwin's Bay. So I think Newton probably needs to be on the river, because when you're first arriving in this area and deciding this is a place that you're going to settle, you sail up that big old bay and you probably set down in the mouth of the river, don't you? So I think it's not unreasonable that that's going to be our starting point, is that Newton is going to be this area here around the edge of the river mouth. So let's zoom in on that a bit and think about putting maybe a why did I click on roads? I don't want road tools. So let's look at my city wall tools. We've got straight 10-foot city walls, and we have straight 20-foot city walls, and we have got 10-foot smooth city walls. So the question we have to ask ourselves now is, did our builders make straight walls? Straight walls are obviously easier to build. So when you're thinking about a new settlement, you probably, you start out without walls. You start out maybe with a log stockade, and that's not likely to be straight. But then when you start building walls, the odds are good that those walls are going to be straight, because you're going to want to build them as easily as possible, aren't you? And you're not going to be wanting to worry about curving them round. So Newton probably had a set of straight defensive walls. So my first thing, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight to symbols. So first off, let's look at what we have on our symbols sheets. We have got a buildings sheet, just the one buildings sheet. We're going to need more of them, so let's add in a couple more building sheets to be going on with, and then I'll worry about why in a moment. So first new sheet, we'll have buildings low, and then we'll add another one, and we'll call it buildings high. So what that lets me do is apply different sheet effects to the three different types of buildings, and without any effort on my part at all, I can have buildings that have a lower drop shadow and therefore appear shorter, and a larger drop shadow and therefore appear taller, like towers and things. So we go to buildings and we will copy all of the effects from there, and we will paste them into buildings low and buildings high. Then we'll change the drop shadow. We will edit that. So for buildings high, I am going to change these offsets from 2 to 4. And in low, I'm going to change these offsets to 1. There we go. So now we've got 3 different types of buildings. We're starting with, we have buildings high selected at the moment, which is what we want. It's not going to place this on buildings high. I'm going to have to move it, but at least I know that I'm currently drawing high buildings. And we've got a couple of tower symbols here. So we've got some symbols. Unfortunately, you can't really see the symbols if I put them like that. You can see them slightly better when I've got them on the edge of the screen like this. And these kind of match what the house tools draw for us. So we will pick one of these towers. I don't know what the difference between the 2 towers is. I suspect it may be size. So let's just pick each of them and see. Yeah, this is the slightly smaller one. We'll go with the slightly smaller one. And I'm going to mark where I think Newton was using these towers. So I'm going to put this here. This is trying to snap to the road at the moment, which I'm actually okay with. I'm going to put one there, and then I'm going to say, right, so when we're drawing this wall, we can't have it go over the coastline. So when they were thinking about this, they were drawing along the lines here, essentially. So I'm going to place these by eye. They're not a distance apart that is fixed. And this is a later development of Newton. It started small. And originally this probably would have been a log palisade. But for now, we've got these towers along the coast. And we are going to link them together with, again, I clicked on roads, which is not what I'm looking for. I'm going to link them together with our city walls. But we want straight city walls. And our 10-foot city wall, because I don't want a 20-foot city wall for this. Our 10-foot city wall is not straight. So I'm going to hit Advanced. And I'm going to find my city wall 10 foot here. And I'm going to duplicate it. So I'm going to select city wall 10 foot and I'm going to select New. Oops, I didn't want to do that. I just accidentally deleted the name, which I didn't want to do because I wanted to keep that. So city wall 10 foot straight, we will call this. So these are currently identical. I now need to change the straight one. So we're using a path or polygon, and going to options, we swap smooth to straight, and that's the only change we need to make. And now that tool, instead of being a smooth line, is going to draw me a straight line, and I can just draw a line between each of my towers. Now I have got a bit of city wall. Bit of defensive wall along the coast there. That would have been built after Newton originally formed. It would have, as I say, it would have been a wooden stockade initially, and as it grew, they would have started building more defensive walls. And that section of wall still exists, but the rest of it doesn't necessarily. Coming back to our towers. Actually, I want to check what sheets this has put things on. Whether it did actually put these on the high buildings sheet. So if I hide the high buildings sheet, do the towers disappear? The whole wall disappears. Right, okay. That's interesting. I'm fine with that. In fact, I have no problem with it putting my tower on the high buildings sheet. That, since we don't have a walls sheet, that makes sense. Oh, we do have a walls sheet. They should have been on walls. Why are they on buildings instead? I am going to take a quick look at the tool and see whether that was my fault. So my city wall straight tool, oops, I didn't want to select it. I wanted to look at it in the advanced view. So when I look at the properties on this, to remember where I'm looking, yeah, I think I'm looking at these properties. Yeah, that tells me what layer it should be on. And that says it should be on the city walls layer. But on the buildings sheet. So yeah, this has been set up to draw our walls on the buildings sheet. Not on the walls sheet, slightly strangely. I don't know why it would do that when we've got a walls sheet. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave it as it is for the moment, but I'm going to move these. I'm going to need to lock the grid, because I've just selected the grid as well. So we select not the grid, so I'm not doing this to the grid. And I'm going to move this to the walls sheet and see what difference it makes in its appearance. Right, so there's no effects on the walls sheet. I'm going to dive to the mapping guide for a moment and see if I can figure out why. What do they say the walls sheet is for? Because we've got our walls. So let's see. Time to all the tower and gate symbols aligned to the wall. For the gates, so it doesn't say anything about what sheet the walls would be on there. Even though we know for reasons they're putting them on the building sheet. Right, sheet effects. Let's see if it mentions it in there. Okay. The sheet effects contained within the template wizard for this style are set up to work best with map sizes of 1000 by 800 to 2000 by 1600. So for my map, I should be using Annual Fantasy Cities large effect settings, but I'm probably not going to, on the simple basis that for the most part, I want to be able to zoom in, and therefore I need the sheet effects that are designed for the smaller settings. There's no mention in here at all of how that wall is supposed to work. So I'm going to make guesses and make it up as I go along. I don't want the walls where they've got them, because they're currently, so on this list they are above the buildings, which means that in real terms they are beneath the buildings on the actual map, because it draws things from the top of the list down. So anything lower down on the list gets drawn over the top of anything higher on the list. And there's two ways of looking at that. One is that, yes, you want it that way around, so you can have your wall, and then you can draw a tower, and the tower will be over the top of the wall rather than the other way around. The other way of looking at it is that if you put buildings right up against the wall, it would be useful to have them be drawn underneath the wall, so that you don't have to position them exactly. A little bit of overlap doesn't matter. It just slightly chops the back of the building off. If you follow my reasoning there. So I'm going to copy all of the effects from sheets from buildings high. So that's the modified version of the drop shadow that gives us a bigger drop shadow. And I'm going to paste them into walls. So now my walls have the same effect as the building, but they're on the walls sheet. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my advanced tools, go to the city walls straight, and I'm going to set it to use not buildings, but walls as its current sheet, as the sheet that it draws on. And I'm going to make the same adjustment. Oops, wrong button. I meant to press properties. Same adjustment on the other city walls sheets, tools. And that's interesting. We've got dikes as well as a wall tool. Now those, of course, will not have the same effect as a wall, because they're backwards walls. Dikes, aren't they? They're walls that go down instead of walls that go up. So let's just check quickly and see what that's using, and if that is using walls. No, that's also using buildings. That makes no sense that that would be on buildings. So I'm going to leave that alone because I probably aren't going to be using any dikes here, if I'm honest. But if I do, what I'll do is I'll set up a separate wall sheet. So I will have a walls dikes sheet, and I'll give that a different set of effects to try and duplicate the look of a dike. But for now, our walls are not going on the building sheet. They're going on the walls sheet, but they still look like tall buildings. A variation I could do on that, of course, and let's demonstrate that now. I don't want to do it through there. I want to do it through here. Is I could adjust just the wall, but not the towers, and put it on the buildings sheet. The problem with that is that our towers now look very silly. And the reason for that, of course, is because the building goes over the top of the walls, and we've now labeled that wall as a building, which we don't want to do. So possibly how I should have demonstrated this is the other way around. Let's zoom in a bit. I definitely should have done it the other way around. I should also have taken a pill before I started this sheet, but hey, no fish is perfect. I might take one in a moment so that it lasts me for the rest of the thing. So if I take the towers and I move them to the buildings high sheet, initially that's not going to make any difference. Oh yes it is. Why is that making a difference? Why are they taller than the wall? The walls are supposed to be using the same settings as the buildings high. Did I just copy? Did it not copy? I think it may have not copied. I think my drop shadow on there may only be... No, that is 4 high. And our buildings high drop shadow is 4 high. Interesting. Okay. So, one step of what I was about to show is apparently unnecessary. What I was thinking was that to make this work, I would have to set the wall to using the same height as the buildings instead of the taller height. And then using buildings high for the towers would have those towers stand up over the walls. It's doing that anyway. For some reason. And I'm looking at this, and to me, those towers definitely seem to have a stronger drop shadow than the wall does. And yet the wall is supposed to be using the same level of drop shadow. I'm confused by that. I am actually, in fact, going to set the walls back down to 2. I've decided that I don't want really high walls. Walls the height of the building is fine, isn't it? And to me, I can't really see any difference with that. But yeah, we've got our towers now that are towering over the walls and marking these 4 locations on the walls. So, how big do we want to say that Newton originally was? Let's give it a gate. That's huge. We don't want that. Is this a smaller gate? This is a smaller gate. So what I need to do is unfortunately snapping currently to the road, which is not what I want it to do. I mean, snapping to a wall, that would be absolutely fine, but I don't really want it snapping to the road. So what I think I'll do is I will manually rotate this and then move it into place. So I can rotate it. I can rotate it in 15-degree increments with the Shift key, which is probably fine, like that. And then I can move this. And and put our gatehouse here. So now I'm going to need a little bit more wall. It's a slightly odd design that our gatehouse is not in the wall. The wall is not positioned correctly to let us do that because the road's already in place. And I could fix that by changing the design, moving the road, for example. Or alternatively, I can just have the gatehouse as a separate construction on the basis that the wall's already here. And maybe the gatehouse was a later addition, or maybe, this is another option, now that I think about it, and I should have thought about this sooner because it makes perfect sense to do it this way. Maybe I get rid of the tower at this end, and I have the wall culminate in our gatehouse. So our gatehouse needs, obviously, to... yeah, I'm going to have to move the road very slightly to make this work, I think. So I'm going to put the gatehouse there. I'll redraw this so I can see what I'm doing. And I'll move the road a bit so that it fits through the gatehouse. So, easily done. And problem solved. So now our wall of towers ends at the towers of the gatehouse there. But because this is no longer a defensive wall, I'm not going to continue this on the way it originally would have gone. Instead, I'm just going to put a little bit of wall here. And I'm going to zoom in and slightly adjust this. No, actually, that looks about right. I don't necessarily want it to line up exactly with the edge of the gatehouse. So we've got a little bit of leftover wall there next to the gatehouse, but the rest of the wall from that point onwards has been demolished for whatever reason. Probably just robbed out to make other buildings. And the city is certainly bigger than this, but this is Newton at its height, I suppose, before it merged with Red Wolf. These buildings come from. I think in similar vein, we're going to get another tower, and we're going to put it. Let's see if that had a straight line coming out of it. If that had a straight line coming out of it, it would block the wall at that end. I should probably have a gatehouse at both ends, shouldn't I? How about we do that? How about we put a gatehouse, another gatehouse inside the city, over here somewhere. And again, we're going to place this and then move it into position so that the snap doesn't cause us trouble. It's not the only way of dealing with that, but it works nicely. And we will say not the grid because we still haven't fixed that. So let's fix that now. And then, so the way to do this is not on sheets necessarily, but on layers. If I go to layers, I've got a hex and square grid layer. And this third block on there is the fix. So by hitting that, I've frozen or fixed the hex square grid layer, and anything drawn on that layer, I now can't affect, which means I can't select it and move it in any way, shape, or form. So now I can select the move tool, deliberately click in a position that would have selected the grid as well, just to show how it works. And it doesn't select the grid. Everybody's happy. We've got our tool exactly as we wanted it, and we can move our gatehouse. Now we're going to need another bit of wall. 10-foot straight city wall coming from the tower here, and it's going to be coming down to the gatehouse. And that looks like I've positioned that about right. Yeah, that looks right to me. I don't like the overall shape of that, though. I really want this wall and gatehouse, I want this to be a straight line. leading into the gatehouse. It just doesn't look right to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the wall as my measure of how this is going to work. And I'm going to put my wall up here in a straight line. It doesn't need to be perfectly straight, but it needs to be pretty straight. Then I'm going to move my gatehouse. And I'm going to move my gatehouse up to match the wall. So what this means is now the road's going to need moving again. So what I'll do is I will move a point there to bring the road up to where I want it to be. A point there. Let's move this point down slightly. And then I'll bring this point up. Now I think our road looks rather better, and it goes between these two gatehouses from what was once Newton. I think over here we're going to draw another bit of straight wall. And on this one, maybe we'll go a little bit further and have another tower. Again, that's about there. But the wall isn't quite right. At this bottom end, it's a little bit out of sync with the gatehouse. Oops. Yeah, that's not what I wanted to do. I don't like the kink in that wall where it's having difficulty with that very narrow angle, so I'm going to move the point at this end as well and just straighten it up. And that is going to require me to move the tower to line up better with the wall. Yay! Perfectionism. How to kill your map by making you never finish. So anyway, now we've got this bit of old Newton wall. And in fact, we kind of like that. So let's have a look at the text sheets for a moment. And we're going to add another text sheet. So first off, we're going to copy all of the effects from this text sheet. Then we're going to add a new sheet. And we will have text GM. We'll add another one, which we will call text POI. And this one we will call a POI. So let's paste our effects onto each of these. So these sheets, the text effects are exactly the same on each of these sheets. So they will look the same, but I can switch them on and off independently of each other. So I can hide all of the GM text, for example, or hide all of the POI text. And in this case, I'm going to put this as POI text. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to draw an arc. And I'm going to desperately try and remember how this is going. This needs to work because I almost always get this wrong. Then I'm going to right-click on the text and select text along a curve. And I'm going to type old Newton wall. I'll worry about text properties in a moment because I don't expect this to work first time. I expect it. Oh dear, I should have worried about the text properties, shouldn't I? So let's try that again, and this time we will worry about the text properties because I had not quite twigged how big that was going to be. Let's pick. Oh, pick a font, pick a font, pick a font. I don't know what font am I going to use. I can't remember what any of these fonts actually look like. It's the problem. So I think for the moment, I am just going to go with simple legible, and I'm going to go to Verdana, and I'm going to change this height, which is basically friggin' huge, and I'm going to give it a height of, just picking a number largely at random for the sake of seeing what it looks like. And that was interesting. Did you actually write anything there? How small did I make that font? Yeah, I made that font ridiculously small, didn't I? Yeah, there it is. And as I suspected, it's written it the way I didn't want it to write. I had a feeling it was going to do that. And I know I need to be much bigger text. So when I draw this, it's writing from right to left along that arc. So it's treating it like an arch, and I want it to treat more like a dip when writing. I want it to write from this end. And there is, I'm sure, a way to do that, but I can't for the life of me remember how. I'll try just selecting the other end of the curve. I don't think for one moment that is what it's going to do. Ah, hang on. We have a use other side of curve. That might do it. I need to switch off align text upright to be able to use that. Use other side of curve. Old Newton wall, text properties. Let's set that to 10. That's giving me what I actually wanted it to be. So now we have Old Newton wall there as our bit of text. And we can, if we can select it, we can move it up to there. Then we will rotate it somewhat. We will not rotate the water. That would be a bad thing. We'll give our rotate point roughly in the middle there, and we will just rotate it to look better along as it goes along Old Newton wall. So now we've labelled the Old Newton wall as a point of interest. That works fine for me. So Red Dwarf, by its very nature, is going to need to be the other edge of the city here, isn't it? So Newton formed here, Red Dwarf formed over here, logically. So we need to put in some stuff to mark Red Dwarf. And one of the things that we're going to be using to mark Red Dwarf is the fact that by its very nature, by the sound of it, it's got to have wharves, hasn't it? So Newton was a new settlement, and Red Dwarf was specifically a port-based settlement. So let's look at our roads and see, we have got, on this, we've got dust roads and we have got dirt roads. And we have got paved roads. Paved roads is really what we want. Let's take a paved road polygon. And we will say, what if Red Dwarf came along drawing it this small, I could just as easily have just used a road rather than a polygon version. And let's say that we have built some nice stone dock front there. Let's see how that would work if I just used a road instead. So let's go with our 10-foot paved road, and we'll kind of do the same along here. But this time we will just draw out along the edge of the... Yeah, so that's much larger. I think actually I kind of prefer the 10-foot road. They're only 10 foot. These are only 10 foot wide, which means that this section of stone frontage is only 10 foot deep, which is not very big for what it is. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our advanced tools here on the road, and I am going to duplicate our 10-foot paved road, and you guessed it, I'm going to create a 20-foot paved road. And on there we will change our properties from a fixed width, that's interesting, it's using a fixed width of 13 for our 10-foot road. So I am going to make that a fixed width of 23 on the assumption that there is a good reason for the extra 3 feet and that that reason is fixed and has to do probably with the effects. And it may well be drawing an extra entity outline fixed at 10 feet. Got it. So that's what it's doing. It's drawing an underlying road at 13 feet and then a 10-foot road on top of that, and that's how it's getting its effects for the roads, is by having 2 separate entities, one of which is wider to provide the outline. So hopefully this should still work nicely drawn like that. So that is our 20-foot paved road, and let's draw in some 20-foot paved road over here. We're not going to bother following the line of the coast here because it'll be hidden by the bit of road. And that's much larger and generally looks rather better. So we'll get rid of this bit of road. Trying to be careful not to get rid of the water when we do it. Come on, select the bit of road here, please. Why are you not selecting that bit of road? That's weird. Don't know why it's not letting me select that bit of road. Okay, so I can select it to move the point. Can I then select it to delete it? And weirdly, the answer is no. Why are you not selecting that? That's very strange. I don't know why it's doing that. Right, select the erase tool. Select our road, and it is not letting us do it. Is it not letting us select any roads? They can't be frozen because I wouldn't be able, because if they were fixed, I wouldn't be able to do anything with them. Nothing on here is frozen. I genuinely do not know why it's not letting me adjust these roads, except by changing their points. I can still change those. That's selected the water. I need to fix the water, so I'm not going to mess with it. So let's look for where our water is. I wonder what layer. Water rivers. Let's freeze the water and rivers. So in theory, this should just let me select that. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we got rid of that. We did it a slightly cack-handed way, but we got rid of it. And I didn't want that. This time I did want the roads tool. Road paved 20 feet. And we'll come up along here and give ourselves a bit more of that wharfage. So now we've got Newton over here and Red Wharf over here. And realistically, they're perhaps a bit close together. Let's just take our distance tool and find out. From there to there, we are looking at, I don't know, 1,500 feet. Okay, catch you later, earlier. So they started out as small settlements within sight of one another, not entirely unreasonable for security purposes. They're perhaps a little close together, but I think it'll do. So this would be Red Wharf over here, And again, I think we want some point of interest text. But this time we'll just do a straight line text. And we'll just call it Old Red Wolf. And we will just place it over here where Old Red Wolf is, and that's now now we've got an idea of the two parts of the two origin settlements of this this city. Let's look now at street settings. So this is Cartographer's Annual issue 25. So the streets for this are labeled CA25. So CA25 default kind of looks like that. It's a mix of wood and stone buildings. We can also choose to have just stone. We can have vari-color buildings, which means that it will draw those buildings in the color I have currently selected. We can have huts, which are smaller. We can have just wooden buildings. We can have wooden huts and smaller huts. The first huts I showed was vari-color huts. I think we're going to go with the default for the moment because I just want to give myself some buildings for scale as much as anything. And I'm just going to draw a few buildings along this road here, over in the Newton region. So there's not a lot of room between the old Newton wall and the road, but there is enough that we can put buildings in there. So mainly the ones that are going sideways. Not so much, this one here overlaps the wall. We don't want that there. Let's instead just copy this one over there. Just for convenience, I'm going to need to slightly rotate it so it wasn't a good copy. But it'll do us to be going on with, just to give us an idea of our scale as to where we're looking at. So that's, we could have had a reasonably sized settlement within the old Newton wall when the whole wall was there. So that was definitely Newton at its height, because it would have started out just as a very small settlement of maybe a dozen buildings. So already just that one road along the inside of the wall there has got more buildings than the settlement originally had. But it grew up and probably had I'm sure at some point it would have had a rivalry with Red Wolf, but then eventually they started working together and gave us, as they grew, merged together to create Calwin's Bay. I've never actually defined for myself who Calwin was. I'm assuming it was whoever was in charge of the original settlement, which would have been Newton. So Newton would have been Newton's first leader, would presumably have been Calwin. I don't even know where Calwin came from. I need to check my language notes and see which naming system would best work with the name Calwin. It's a slightly odd one. It may not even be Calwin, thinking about it. It could be that is a Guredrosalian corruption of Calvin. Could well be a Kundaiman name and actually have been Calvin, since it's, they've got the K. But it might not be. It could be Heritalian. I think Heritali has a K, but I'll have to look it up and see, because I don't keep all of this information in my head, despite what people may think about me. Let's go slightly. Oh no, it's not let me do that. So I'm just using this. That should let me. I can have some buildings actually shadowing the inside of the wall there quite nicely. Now I can also draw buildings on an individual basis. Of course, this is using the CA25 default symbol by default, because it on default that's what it uses. Let's look for the house sizes, the house types specifically, though, because I'm not seeing CA25. Is that just because these are in alphabetical and not numerical order? It's not symbol set. It should be. This is slightly odd. I'm not finding the CA styles. Why am I not finding the CA styles? I mean, I'm finding other CA styles, but not CA25. CA215, CA240, CA210. That's odd. Okay, I'm going to look at this from the point of view of the street settings. What are the house settings that we're using on here? We are simply using default. So that seems to be the only house style that, oh dear, and I've just turned it off. It doesn't look like we've got actual house styles. It's just changed the default for this to a CD Pro style colored block, essentially. That's slightly odd. So that means I can't really afford to change the house settings. What are we doing with this house settings on CA25 stone? Yeah, all that's done is just change the color. Interesting. So our default building there is stone, and we don't seem to have. And yeah, when I change the building types, it messes the buildings up. Let's have a quick look at the mapping guide and see what it says about buildings. Right. Does this say anything about how these work? And the answer is no. So for random street, it tells us we can use the CA25 settings, one of the CA25 settings, which is what we were using. But what we're not getting is any information on how those buildings work with the buildings tool. You can use the buildings drawing tool available from the all drawing tools button. That's interesting. So that's if you don't own City Designer 3, there is a buildings tool, drawing tool added in. But otherwise, they only give us any guidelines on using the random street. Odd. So obviously, I've used this mapping style before, and I think I have run into this problem of if I mess with the building, selecting the building type, it goes apeshit on me, and I have to reset it somehow. But I can't remember what my solution was at the time, unfortunately. I'm going to insert an extra building here, but all of this is subject to change because this is just stuff that I've put in just to give me a starting point on Old Newton. And we are going to want similar over here at Red Wolf. So let's give ourselves some roads. Let's go with let's go with 10-foot dirt road coming from the wharf there. And let's do something similar over here. In fact, let's have 3 coming from here. And perhaps a second one coming from the other end of this wharf here. Now, I'm now going to need to make some adjustments to these roads. Now it's letting me select them. Good. Because I want to put the stone, the paved roads, effectively the wharfage, I want to put that above the other roads so that those roads don't overlap them. And now I think we will give ourselves a... Can I use just a straight road and connect these together? The answer is yes, because of course I can adjust their positioning afterwards to work. So let's just draw a road in there. And then we will move some points here. You'll just go up as far as there. You'll just go up as far as there. And you'll just go up as far as there. So now we've got a little bit of roadway over here at Red Wharf, and again we'll come back to our random street tool and we'll give ourselves some houses. And we're kind of getting a feel for what Red Wharf must once have looked like back when it was not just a region, a district in Calwin's Bay, but a settlement of its own with a little sort of village grown up here where these wharves are. The wharves originally would have been wooden and eventually they got upgraded to stone. The road sections there are going to connect up to other roads as we carry on. But we've got our two close together villages. I say too close together because just thinking in terms of the area of land needed to support these villages, there's a good chance that Red Wharf grew up deliberately separated from Newton but connected, looking at the way this has been put together. So there's 2 stories I can tell myself here, and I'm going to make a note of which one I'm going to go with, or at the very least I'm going to make a note of the 2 options, because let's give myself a Calwin's Bay entry in keep for noting this. Calwin's Bay. So first thing is we will remind ourselves that Calwin's Bay formed from the merging of Newton and Red Wharf. Newton was the first settlement. Settlement does not have a K in it, fish. Where Red Wharf grew from divisions within the early colonists. One group wished to maintain strong links to their home, and the other to become more independent. So yeah, these independent souls moved a short distance along the coast and founded a fishing village which became Red Wharf. So there we go. So as we now have this, we've got a situation whereby the folk in Newton were probably concentrating quite a lot on gathering resources in the local area and shipping them back home to, whether it be to Herotal or Kundheim. I don't think I actually made a note of which one founded it. I just have a note, I think, of founding. Yeah, colonists found the settlement of Newton in Calwin's Bay. I never specified in my timeline who those initial colonists were. So they were presumably possibly logging and starting to farm in the region, maybe searching for mineral deposits and looking for goods that they could ship back to Kundheim and Herotal. And then as the new colonists came in and wanted to be more independent, wanted to break free from the place they were coming from, so probably less sponsored colonization, they got fed up and they just moved a little distance away and set up their own camp, and that camp grew into Red Wharf. Eventually their differences were settled and they remerged to become the city of Calwin's Bay. All of that seems to make a degree of sense to me. Hopefully that makes a degree of sense to you as well. So, I am going to say that Old Red Wharf still represents a slightly independent feel within Calwin's Bay. It still has some of that early breakaway feel to it. So the Red Wharf neighbourhood still maintains a sense of independence. And is the home to most of Calwin's Bay's fishing fleet. So while the city as a whole has become primarily a trading city, the neighbourhood of Calwin's Bay still maintains its old nature as essentially a fishing village, still inside Calwin's Bay itself. So the main docks then originally would have been up here by Old Newton. I suspect that what we're looking at is a situation where the Old Newton Wall and the town itself was slightly separate from the docks. So thinking of a situation in which if they were attacked for whatever reason by Brownie raiders or even settlers coming from a different nation who wanted the land for themselves and figured they could do it by wiping out Newton and just taking their space because they picked a good space, then they could get to the docks and maybe cause trouble there, but the citizens themselves would be safe behind their walls. So the docks are probably along here. So let's do the same sort of thing we did elsewhere. We will go with our 20-foot paved road. And what we're going to do is we're going to slightly smooth out this area of coastline by putting our road along it. If we come all the way along here, and then we can see how well it fits. And it doesn't quite work. But it doesn't actually work badly. Can I just move that, or do I have to? Yes, I can. So if I just move the whole thing up slightly. And then we've only got that one little bit there sticking out. And what I'm going to do there, to do this, I'm going to have to unlock the water. And then I'm going to move just 1 point. So I'm selecting the water over here, won't see what it's doing. And then I will move down till I find the point that I want, which is that point there. And I'm just going to shift that very slightly up. Redraw to be sure that that's how I want it, which it is. And then relock the water and rivers so that I don't accidentally mess with it in future. So now here, these are 50-foot squares, so that's 50, 100, 150, 200, 250, call it 260, 270, 260 probably feet of wharfage there. So that's providing us with a reasonable basis for our docks to be going on with. Let's come back to our roads, and now we're going to pick our 10-foot paved road. And we're going to come out to the, I think we're going to come out to the 50-foot line. I think is not unreasonable. And we're going to do this on each of these points. Right. And we are going to cheat to do this. We're going to need to move that one very slightly because it's just out of position. So we'll zoom in so we can see what we're doing. We'll select our move tool. We will select that bit of road. And we'll select the edge of it because we know we want the edge to line up with the edge of that bit. Now we got that wrong because of course we lined up the outer edge, not the inner edge, and we wanted the inner edge. So let's do this again. If I redraw, I can see where the inner edge is. And now that should line up nicely. Yes, it does. Good. So now I'm going to use a copy. I'm going to copy that bit of road there. I'm going to copy it from that position. And I'm going to copy it to that position. And that position. And that position. And that position. And I'm not going to go to the end there. And now we have got something that is beginning to look like a port. And I'm just going to deny another nasty little bugger that AutoMod has successfully caught for me and prevented me from needing to worry about people trying to sell me viewers. Like I need someone to buy viewers from. I've had a whole 2 people in this stream. This is one that I'm probably going to export because I'm not doing a great job on it, admittedly, but I'm going from first principles on this, and this has a bit more of a tutorial-y type feel rather than just me hanging around chatting about RPGs while drawing a map. So this is one that I feel probably should get a tutorial export to YouTube. So this will probably go out there as a drawing a city semi-tutorial thing. So we've got our sort of porty type bit there. We're going to want some roads. I think it's not unreasonable. I don't think we're going to have dirt roads here, are we? I think we're going to have more paved roads, but we'll go with the 5-foot paved roads. And we are going to do them on these lines here, and we will just run them up to the main dirt road that is running along. It's possible that portions of that dirt road will get replaced with paved road at some point. As I feel like doing it. It's possible that I might even change the whole city to paved roads. It's not that difficult to do. But for the moment, let's just connect those up. We'll put our original road on the top because we want these roads to connect to that road rather than to sit over the top of it. And now we've got this situation where we've got a number of roads leading out of this dock area. What we don't have is any big sort of plaza type things. This is only 20 feet wide, remember. Although, I don't know, is 20 feet enough? I don't think 20 feet is enough, really. If you've got a busy dock, boats getting off, thinking of the description that I've given, for example, in the scenario that I've written up, I don't think that is enough. So what I think I might do is put some plaza type areas in, but not everywhere. So let's take our paved polygon and leave us draw a bit of paved polygon in there. And now we've got our main unloading central area there, and that's rather bigger. So I'm going to zoom right in on this for the moment, because I'm going to save before I lose everything. At this point, I am going to pick white as a colour, and I am going to draw my second grid. So I've already got a grid there. I am going to add a new grid, which for purposes of this, I'm just going to call grid 5 foot. I could have called it battle map grid, fine grid, whatever, but I'm just going to call it grid 5 foot. And initially, I'm just going to copy the transparency from there. I could have created it just as easily, but copy the transparency from there. Make sure that that is selected as my current sheet. And then I'm going to draw a hex or square overlay, which is going to be a square grid. I'm not going to set the snap grid. I'm not really using a snap grid anyway, so not desperately relevant. And I'm going to set that at a grid spacing of 5 feet. There we go. Now I've got my good old-fashioned D&D battle map grid in this area here, which gives me an easier view at how big is this space. So how many people can we comfortably fit into this space? Well, I mean, in D&D terms, for battle, we're putting 1 per square, but obviously in real world terms, a milling crowd does not follow those rules. So, I mean, along there, we've got 100 foot, essentially. So even just lined up for battle, we could line up 100 soldiers. Sorry, no, we couldn't. We could line up 20 soldiers along there. And I think that's not entirely unreasonable for a place like this. I'm willing to accept that. So milling crowd-wise, we're probably looking at... You could get 100 people milling around in there without too much trouble, I think, just as a crowd scene. So I think this is kind of getting on to what we want. But I need to make sure that I have the features that I have referenced in my scenario. So let me bring up my scenario now on this monitor. Obsession stuff. Echoes of Legend. Where is Echoes of Legend? Welcome to the Peak's Edge, in fact, is what I'm looking for. Yeah, so my description, what do we have? We have... The docks are a bustling hive of activity, or hastened away from the ship and out of the way. Crowds surrounding you are a similarly varied mix. The buildings are an interesting blend of the architectural styles of, but I have some specific things referenced that are going to need to be here. I will need Okay. There's a Heratali and a Lunman trade delegation here. Those buildings need to be there. I also need a warehouse and a mercantile office, or is that mercantile office actually the... Yes, so at the very least then, I need a warehouse, a mercantile office, and 2 trade delegations. The trade delegations are apparently 3 doors apart. So that's an interesting starting point, that I know I need a couple of buildings 3 doors apart. So if I use my little load tool to put some buildings in, it's not letting me line up to that road for some reason. Yeah, this is quite a small space, so this can't be all of the docks, obviously. But let's copy a couple of buildings across, because that's going to be the easiest way to get them in and give me an idea of scale as to what my random tool is building me. It's obviously positioned poorly. But I can bring it across to this side. Okay, so how are we doing with that? That's 5, 10, 15, 20. So that's a 20 by 15 building. It's not a huge building, is it, a 20 by 15? But it's not necessarily a small building. That might work for the mercantile office. Or I could put the mercantile office down here, which gives me plenty of space for the warehouse. How big would a medieval warehouse be, do we think? Anybody have an idea as to how big a medieval warehouse is likely to be? It's kind of stuff that I really ought to know. Okay, right, so we have an article here on the evolution of warehousing. Medieval warehouses. It's more on the construction techniques rather than the size, so that's not going to help me. Okay, that's a 28mm medieval warehouse selling for £187. But if I can get the sizes on that... Okay, so that is coming out at... And it's not an unreasonable... It's a bit small by my reckoning, but it's not an unreasonable. So 8 by 10 by 14, we'll call it, in squares. So 40 foot by 50 foot, and we'll ignore the height, that's a really tall warehouse. So I probably want at least 40 foot by 50 foot, probably maybe a little bit bigger for my warehouse. So how about I put my warehouse over here? So let's have my default building. And we will go, so that's 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. Let's take it out a little bit beyond the end of that. So we're more in the region of 50 feet by 40 feet. So that, I think, is not an unreasonable size for a warehouse. And I wanted a a mercantile office next to it. So let's have a building in next to that will make my mercantile office, and we'll make that about that size. So that is not entirely unreasonable, I feel. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Just pressed the wrong button there for a moment. Okay, so yeah, we're getting a start on our buildings here. Not too unreasonable. It's a fairly small space for what I have described. So maybe I actually need to expand the whole thing. But if I do, I don't want the main road coming through this. So, decisions. I think this is going to kind of work, but it isn't quite as I originally saw it in my head. So let's put some more buildings in though. Okay, so if that is one of my 2 trade delegations, I can put in a building next to it, a smaller building next to it, or even a reasonably sized building next to it. Then a couple of smallish buildings over here in this space, and I should probably replace this building with one that's a funky shape to match the road. In fact, I could do that with both of those, couldn't I? And I'm just going to copy this building for good measure and put it down here. In fact, I'll put 2 of them in here, but I'll put them apparently very poorly. So let's do this. Right, redraw on that. So, my 2 trade delegations are apparently 3 doors apart. So that does mean, theoretically, if I assume by my meaning that, and I can always adjust the scenario slightly to make it clearer, if this is one of my trade delegations, and this is the other one, there are 3 buildings in between them, so that makes them 3 doors apart, and that works for those. Do I have any other buildings that I specifically reference? No, I think the warehouse, the mercantile office, and the 2 trade delegations are the only buildings that I specifically reference. So that works for the basis of my port region where the player characters are arriving. It's not necessarily the main port or it's a main port, but there probably are more than one of these for a mercantile trade city like Calwyn's Bay. I can put another one in over here somewhere, similar along similar lines. But this will be the one where my player characters are going to arrive, I feel. Okay, so let's give myself some more buildings. Let's just run a whole bunch of buildings along there. And, well, didn't actually want to put only one in there. I just clicked the button too soon. We'll just come as far as there with those. And we will think about putting some additional roads in. Let's go with some 5-foot dirt roads. And we'll go smooth, because we're going for the more organic feel here now. And we'll have this run around and come down to here. Just to really make a mockery of the remaining bit of wall there. And then I think we'll go with some more dirt road. We'll have a straight dirt road this time. And we'll have that run up to here, and then along this way for quite a distance, and then come back down to the main through road there. Obviously, I've got buildings in the way of these roads at the moment, because these buildings, well, actually that one came through quite nicely. That one could do with moving a bit. Just like so. And over this side, that one definitely needs to move. There we go. Now when I zoom out, we've now got a strange haze over this, and that is because we're seeing the 5-foot grid. If I turn the 5-foot grid off, oh, we've still got a haze over this. That must be, even the 50-foot grid must be enough to give us that. So let's try turning off both grids for the moment. That's more like it. Yeah, no haze with no grids. I'm going to adjust the grid effects at a later date, I think, because I don't like the way these grids are necessarily working, but they've given me something to work with for the moment. And we're starting to get an initial outline of where our city is going and how big our city is going to be. We definitely need another port section, or maybe two. I think what I might well do here is come back to my... why are you not... Don't tell me you don't understand the road. You do understand the road. I've taught you roads. So let's take a road here and come from this point through to this point, because that should nicely smooth out that section of coastline. And we'll take our 10-foot paved road and we'll join the two together. Now I'm going to need to tweak these, obviously, which is why I wasn't too fussed about how accurately I placed them to be going on with. It must be just a fraction out. There we go. And I need to move this end, and we'll just do this a little bit until we get something we're happy with. And that is probably something we're happy with. So now, rather than completely separate sections of port, we have got our dock line running around the coast. But in this section in between, we've built a promenade through, so we've got a nice broad 10-foot wide stretch running along there, and smaller vessels can perhaps moor there, but we haven't got our major docking facilities in that location. And actually I do want to adjust this a little bit more. Yeah, that looks about right. Yeah, that works nicely. So probably along here, we probably have steps down to the water and boats tying up. But these are our major facilities there. And each of these will support a large vessel because the gap between them is 40 foot wide. Now, 40 foot's not huge. It's not that large a vessel. So maybe along this other end, we'll go with a bigger ship, with space for bigger ships over there. Yeah, 40-foot beam is actually not very much. I think, actually, I am just going to knock out 2 of those. And now we've certainly got space for larger vessels coming in there. Might need to extend these out a little bit. What if I were to... Okay, first off, what if I were to put the baseline grid back in? Hang on. That's not right. That grid is a 5-foot grid. Why, when I hit the 5-foot grid, but not... the 5-foot grid is on the grid, not 5-foot grid sheet. That's why. Oh! I thought it would have drawn that 5-foot grid in the right place, and it didn't. Here's the simple answer here. So I need to unfreeze my grid. Where is my grid? There we go. Freeze my grid layer. And I need to pick a point where I hope I'm only picking one grid, which I am. And I'm moving that to the grid 5-foot sheet. That's more like it. Now we're back to where we should be. And I can freeze the grid again. So I thought that the grid would be drawn on the first sheet that it came across that had the word grid in it. Or the current sheet if that sheet had the word grid in it. But apparently not. So I expected it to draw my 5-foot grid on my 5-foot grid sheet, and it didn't. It drew it on my regular grid sheet. So now that's more like it. So now we've got 90 foot between these. And I think I am going to extend these wharves out a bit. So I'm going to send that out to the 100-foot rather than the 50-foot mark. And I'm going to do the same with this one. So what I've now got is 2 larger wharves here that we can use to dock large vessels, and a couple of smaller ones for good measure. So we could have something come in on the outside of each of those, or on either side of that one. If there's no larger vessels in, we can have something in there. A smaller vessel can dock side on, up against the dock if it wants to, but it generally wouldn't. They wouldn't want it to, because that would be taking up extra space. So instead, they come in and they dock up against these things here, these big old wharves going out into the water, and those will go out 100 feet. So if you're looking at maybe a 120, 130 foot vessel, it would stick out past the end of there, but the important parts where it's going to want to unload will come down onto that, and that will work absolutely fine. And if we're looking at maybe something that has a 40 or 50 foot beam, you can just barely squeeze two 40-foot vessels in there side by side. I might actually move one of these along slightly to give us a little bit more room for docking multiple vessels. If I select this one and I just move it to about here, then I've got more room to get two ships inside this interior space. But there's still space for a larger but not too large vessel to come in on this side as well. And if I move this one along, I can have the same effect on the other side and make this look more uniform, for want of a better term. Maybe if I actually do take it to the edge of this space here. So there we go. Yeah, now that probably looks a bit closer to what I wanted it to be. I've only got one warehouse here, so that warehouse is logically going to be a customs warehouse. Now in the scenario it just mentions a warehouse, but if I assume that that is a customs warehouse in that position, and any goods that need to be examined by the authorities would go into that warehouse as they get unloaded. Things that maybe don't need to be examined by the authorities might just be shipped straight away out towards something else. And I can put a warehouse district just inside, somewhere around here, maybe. Yeah, somewhere around here, perhaps, so that we can ship our goods through and into that, into those warehouses as they come out from here. I don't think that would work too badly. It's the bit that takes the longest and requires the most effort when putting together maps like this, is thinking in terms of the practicality of it, because you can just draw a bunch of buildings and be done. But I'm building a working port here, and it's got to be a working port. It has to function as a working port. I don't know a great deal about working ports, so I'm kind of making this up as I go along. But I think we're getting somewhere that sort of works with this. And we're going to be doing something similar to that over here, probably. Although here, maybe we are looking at ships that are just coming in side on, rather than building out into the water in this location. But maybe not. Let's see what we want to do with this. So we'll come back to our 10-foot paved road that we're using for this. And let's start by putting a little wharf out at this end. I think I actually may have positioned that right first time. It's almost but not quite there. The angle is slightly off, so I need to move it about that far maybe. No. I think that's still slightly off, but it's close enough for me. And then I am just going to copy that. And I'm going to put it somewhere over here, and then adjust for position once I've got it in place. So that's close but no cigar. I'm going to move that out to there. No, not quite. Cancel fish, get it right. We are almost but not quite there with that now. Very, very close. Don't know, I moved that far enough. Oh no, that I think we'll do. Unfortunately, I moved that instead of copying it because I'm a fool. So now we'll copy it and put it back where it wants to be on the other end. So again, we'll use this trick. We'll redraw so that I can see the interior size, because that's what needs to line up with the edge of the wall there. And that should give me, yeah, there we go. And I think we'll possibly do something similar on this side. We'll go with another 10-foot section. And we'll actually mirror the coastline around there. We'll want to move this end point in so that it properly overlaps that one. And then we've got our promenade coming out over here. It's close but no cigar. We'll shift it in slightly like that to make it match better. There we go. And then again, I think, yeah, I think it needed to go further, didn't it? So let's insert a new point. And I think I'm going to have messed that up. I think I'm inserting it in the wrong place. And the whole thing has disappeared. Okay, so let's undo that. Bring it back. So what I actually think I need to do is I need to move this. Oh, crap. When did I last save? Because I just lost campaign cartographer there. That's awkward. So let's open our Calvin's Bay map and see what. Oh dear, no, we lost quite a bit there, didn't we? That I wasn't saving soon often enough. What's the autosave set to? Every 5 minutes. So I should have an autosave more recent than that, I'm sure. Oh no, because it prompts before saving, so it would have asked me. Oh, and the autosave is not turned on anyway. Damn, as they say. I don't know what went wrong there. It just crashed out, and I've lost. Have I lost? I haven't lost Red Wolf, at least. I saved after Red Wolf, but everything since Red Wolf is gone. So there is a degree of, I know what changes I made, so I get to do this again and slightly better, hopefully. So, for example, I know that I needed to take out a couple of these. These are not the same ones I took out last time, but I know that that wishes to move out to the end there. Again, we'll redraw so that I can see how I'm lining this up. And my redraw. Okay, and my move from point is going to be that point and needs to line up with there. So that's right-ish, not quite, almost, but not quite. Have I still got my grid? Did I do this? Yeah, I haven't even got my second grid yet. Because I've lost all the buildings around here, of course. I need to redo all of those. So that's Inconvenient, to say the least. I thought I'd saved more recently than that, but apparently not. This is one of the problems with ADHD, of course. I get a bit lost in what I'm doing and forget to save. No, that's still not quite right. This is... I'm just going to do... that. No, I'm not, because that's not quite there. Oh, come on. There we go. Nope, I shouldn't have done that, because now I need to readjust this end because my sense of perfectionism is messing with my head. There is where that needs to be, and I think that's close enough. And we want to move this one because we want to move it out to... Where do we want to move it out to? We want to move it out to probably about here. It's not quite how I had it last time around, and it needs to extend, obviously. But it's sort of close-ish. And we want to move this one. And again, if we move that to about here. So, now I haven't got as big a space between. I've got two larger spaces there than I had before, but they don't work quite the way I had them before. Because I had a clear 2 squares in this central section. So I think actually this wants to go to there, and this to there, and I think so. Now I've got 100 foot between those. No, I do want slightly more than 100 foot, because if I've got ships maybe with a 50-foot beam, they obviously are going to need more space than that. So let's move each of these slightly past that point. So now I've got a little over 100 foot there. Let's use the distance. Let's actually measure this. So over here I have got, that's pretty much 50 feet between those. So 50 feet over here would be about there-ish. So if I now move this out to approximately 50 feet from that, that gives me the 2 smaller ones on the outside and the big space in between, how I had it before. It's not exactly how I had it before, but it will do. And then these I had extended out to 100 foot rather than 50 foot. We'll do that again. And that's not looking so far off how I had it before. We'll save that now quickly. I'll come back to the buildings, and I might actually move the road to give myself a little bit more space this time around. What if I don't curve it quite so clearly into the coastline coming along here? But I do it a little bit more straight rather than echoing the coastline. Then I can extend these roads out to meet it as before. come on, line up. And that one for some reason I didn't put in straight. I'll put it in straight this time. Okay. And then I think what I'm going to do is I'm also going to adjust this. And I'm going to make it that bit bigger. Oops, that was not the point I wanted to move, was it? So I think I'm just going to undo that and start again. In fact, I'm going to do this the easy way. I'm going to get rid of that and I'll draw a new plaza in. And we'll come up a bit bigger and we'll come out to that road this time. Don't actually need to get that perfect because it'll merge with the other roads anyway. So I mean, that gives me a bigger space. Yes, I can visit the VOD to remember, should I wish to do it that way. That is a good point. I'm going to treat this basically as a second draft, to all intents and purposes. So rather than go back and edit what I've done, I've got to reconstruct it so I can reconstruct it, incorporating the lessons that I may have learned first time around. I think will work quite nicely. So first off, let's put. Oh, that's interesting. That's now giving me the. This is giving me basically the most recent building type that I drew, whether it was wooden or stone. That's interesting. I don't seem to be able to manually change this. There probably is a way. What's that settings button? Yeah, that will let me change that color if I know what the stone color needs to be. But I'm actually okay with this being wooden. Warehouses are more likely to be wooden anyway, aren't they? So let's draw my warehouse in wood. I don't have my 5-foot grid at the moment, but I do have an idea of how big it was that I can work from, and it was probably about that big. Let's check my distances on that. And we're going to, that's about 30 foot rather than the 40 I think I did last time. And I just managed to draw a line between the same point, distance is 0. That should be, so that's about 50 by 30 at the moment. I think I drew it at 50 by 40 last time, but I'm okay with that difference. 50 by 30 is not bad. And I think I will set it to be a high building. So this is going to be a towering warehouse where they can stack an awful lot of things. The standard building height is almost certainly 2 stories, so this is more like a 4-story warehouse. So that's a hell of a lot of space inside that. And I think that should work out quite nicely. So there we go. That'll do for that. Let's save. And I liked what I had going on with my little promenade coming around over here. So let's try and recreate that. We had our 20-foot paved bit of wharfage, which I think I had coming through roughly there. That looks kind of the same. Now we'll take a 10-foot road which we used to connect the two together along there. And that's going to need to be tweaked for lining up properly. So we'll want to move that end point, and we'll want to move it down just like that. That works quite nicely, and that end, I think I'm fine with that end as it is. So again, we'll be a bit paranoid about saving at this point. And we will give ourselves our bit of 10-foot road coming out from here to about 50-footish. How well have I positioned that? Pretty damn well. No, don't move it. I made that mistake last time. Copy it. And quick redraw so I can get an idea of where I'm doing. I need to line that up with roughly here. See how that looks. That's almost there, isn't it? Almost. That should be right. Yeah, that will do nicely. So we're reconstructing our port, but slightly different this time round. Slightly bigger space to mill around in here. And we'll put the buildings, we'll be putting those buildings back in, but we'll perhaps be having them slightly different because we've now got less space before you hit the main road. But that works out okay, I think. Let's look at, if we copy one of these buildings across, how well does it actually fit? It doesn't quite fit into that space, does it? So I'd have to shrink that slightly or rotate it 90 degrees. I think that's not a bad size though, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to here. I don't want wood, I want stone. So I need to figure out how to set this to being a stone building. And I suppose one way to do that is to come back to my random road sections and hope that we finish on a stone, which we did. So hopefully my building is now stone. Yeah, I was right. It's using the last one that it did before. I'll need to make a note of the color so that I don't need to do it that way, and I can manually change that by just adjusting the color. But for now, that will get me what I want. Except that it didn't, because I needed to select that building shape, because I want my building to actually match the frontage of the ye oldie roadie coming through there. And then down here we'll match the port road, which is a straighter road. So again, we'll come up here. We'll follow the line of the ye oldie road, and then we'll come down and have a nice straight line matching up to the port side. And that should look okay for a couple of buildings fitting in there. I can do the same here. So the first thing though is this next one. I want my trade delegation in here. So if I give this whole space to the trade delegation, so one big building that houses a trade delegation from, say, let's say this one is Heritol, just off the top of my head, just for now. So that would be the Heritol trade delegation, and the next trade delegation needs to be 3 doors down, which means if I put 2 buildings in there and then the trade delegation over here, that will work fine. So we'll stick with that same policy, but this time what we're going to do is we're going to come down this way. to here. We'll go straight in on this side, and then up here. Well, actually, we're going to be straight up here as well, aren't we? Because at this point, the road is basically straight. So our trade delegations, both of our trade delegations, have an entrance onto the port and an entrance onto the main Oldie road through. So that actually makes sense and works quite nicely, I think, now for what we're doing. So at this point, I'm adding a new building sheet. So yeah, what I'm actually doing is, technically it's not really a building sheet. But it is a building sheet. I'm going to come all the way down. I want to hide it behind things, so I'm going to put it quite high up, I think. Let's put it above roads, but behind everything else. So we will add in here we'll call it the GMPOI sheet, and we will add to the GMPOI sheet an outer glow, and we will give that outer glow a nice yellow color. Might change that later, but for now we'll mess with the settings on the glow later, because until we see it, we don't really know how it's going to look. Right, and now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use a copy to sheet command. So if I right click on the copy button, in the list that comes up on that menu is copy to sheet. And I want to copy that and that to the GMPOI sheet. And then when I redraw, they've got an obnoxious glow. And for some reason, we've lost our... That's weird. Why have we lost our building effects? That seems very odd. Right, let's change the outer glow for starters, because that is hugely obnoxious. Range of 10 units. No, we'll drop it down to a range of 2 units. We'll leave the blur size also at 2, and we'll set our opacity to 50 and see how that looks. Actually, the opacity needs to come back up, because that's now just too difficult to see. But I need to work out why my building effects have disappeared. So I didn't accidentally move them; they are still there, but that POI effect is cancelling out the building effects, and that should not be doing that. That's weird. That shouldn't, because I use this effect on my buildings all the time, and I don't know why on this one it's not doing what it should do. Because all it should do is literally just, because it's drawn underneath the building layer, it should add its effects to it, and that's it. I don't know why it's cancelling the effect on the other sheet that is over the top of it and should take precedence, because it's drawn above it, and weird. Very weird. I don't understand why it's doing that. I may need to look at another sheet and see how I've got it, another map, see how I've got it set up on the other map, and see if I can figure out what I did differently here. But at least that sheet's hidden at the moment, but they are on that sheet, which means that when I fix it and activate that sheet, they will be highlighted with a little glow, and I can see that is a point of interest. So I will know those are my 2 trade delegations when I come back to it, because I've marked them. Tar, as they say, dar. Let's just copy that building and put it down here next to our warehouse. So there's our mercantile office that we know has to be by the warehouse. Now, I think I've got that too far apart, because that's a good 5 foot. That's something we can do now, shall we? Shall we do that now? Shall we actually draw our grid back in that we've lost? Shall we first save and then draw our grid back in that we've lost? Would that be good? So first of all, we wanted a second grid sheet. Add grid battle, aka 5 foot. We'll copy the transparency from the regular grid and paste it to the battle grid. We'll make sure we have battle grid selected, although that's not going to make any difference apparently based on the last time. And we are going to then draw hex or square overlay. No snap, no labeling, just a 5 foot square grid. And in it comes. Then we will immediately, because we know we need to, change properties on it. Remembering first that we need to unlock the hex and square grid. And we will move that to the battle grid. Then we'll relock our grids. And yeah, we've got a 5 foot. So is a 5 foot wide alleyway too wide? I mean, technically in D&D combat terms, although obviously this map isn't for D&D, 5 foot wide is what you need to put one miniature in there and have a fight in an alleyway. I like the idea of alleyways being a slightly more cramped space, but at the same time, I do want people to be able to squeeze past one another to go through the alleyway, rather than just being one person at a time. So I think I will leave it at that distance. It's not too unreasonable. So we'll save that as we are now. I'll move out a little bit. And we need 2 buildings in there. And I am going to do a little bit of a cheaty thing. So I'm going to use change properties. And I think if I do that, will that show me its current? No, it won't show me its current color. That's annoying. I'm sure there's a way of viewing its properties and seeing what color it is now, but I can't remember what off the top of my head. But I'm thinking a couple of wooden buildings in here, unless I assume that apart from the warehouse, everything on the dock is a stone building because this is an important place and they built it all in stone. Shall I assume that? I could assume that. How have I got them described? Do I have them described? Yes, I think I do. Let's see. Yeah, mostly half-timbered constructions. So really, they should be wooden if they're half-timbered. Got a lot of stone buildings here for somewhere that uses half-timbered construction for the most part. I can always slightly adjust the scenario write-up for that. So let me see. Mostly stone and half-timbered constructions. I'm typing on the wrong keyboard. That doesn't help. So it's now mostly stone and half-timbered constructions. So yeah, I think anything that is wood on this map is going to be half-timbered, isn't it? Essentially. That seems reasonable to assume. So yeah, I want a couple of wooden buildings in here to give me my half-timbered construction. And in fact, I kind of want to remove that one and make it half-timbered just to even things up so I've got more half-timbered. In fact, actually, yeah, I'm going to make the mercantile office over there half-timbered as well. So let's pull the same stunt we did before and hope it works out for us. It didn't work out for us. We still have a stone building set up. So I'm going to do the other thing. Let's bring up our random street settings and we will look at the house settings on it. And there we go. So we can see that it's color 38 that I want for stone. I found it on there. There we go. And even though that's okay, so it must be using the first building that it draws, not the last building that it draws, and it's taking its numbers from. There we go. I'm going to make a quick note on the keep in my Calwyn's Bay thing. Wooden buildings using colour 38. Because that is a thing that I need to be able to remember for later. So I've got a note of it now. And I need to insert some buildings. I need to insert a building in here. And this is one of our nice half-timbered buildings. Slightly off-kilter on the back wall there where it's lining up, where it's aligning to the road behind. And then we'll just go with a standard rectangular building shape for the ones over here, because that's pretty well lined up on the on both ends. And we'll pop that in there. So now we've got some half-timbered buildings there. We've got our two trade delegations there. We've got our warehouse here, and we need to just draw in a mercantile office next to the warehouse. And we will just pop that in. This time we'll pop that in that way round. And then we'll go back to that type of building, and we will draw another building in here that kind of follows the line of the road a bit. Like so. And then we will save that. And we wanted, last time when it all went horribly wrong for us, we were extending our promenade out around here. So let's have a go at that. We've just saved, so we should be safe to do it this time, and we'll see what happens. So we want to come from inside here, and we want to come down there, follow our road around. And what I wanted to do last time, and I was trying to rearrange for, was to have it coming in a bit further. So I'm going to take it to there. That's not looking bad, but now I am actually going to slightly finesse this a bit, because I want to have it end not sticking out past the coastline, but level with the coastline, so it just ends and you walk off onto the regular bank of the river at that point. And that works out quite nicely for that. So we can have additional vessels, small vessels moored along there and tied up along here. And we've got our areas for the big ships. We've got our customs warehouse there. We might put more warehousing in over here. Might work nicely. Obviously we need a couple of buildings in to fill this space here. Something in there. I might move this road slightly along actually and make a little bit more room for putting another building. That's not unreasonable, because it doesn't need to be in the specific position where I put it. It can go there. Let's zoom in and draw some stuff in here. Let's give a bit more space between the trade delegation and the building beside it, because I think they probably would have wanted a bit more space. Then let's have an L-shaped building, because L-shaped buildings are fun. It doesn't need to be too big an L-shaped building, but by definition it's going to be a certain amount of bigness to give it room to be L-shaped. And we will do that in there, and then just a regular shaped building over here. Like so, and then a slightly longer one that will come back into the space there. Yeah, there we go. So we are starting to get our port area where the player's characters are going to arrive sorted out a little bit. I need to build out from that far enough to be able to export a map that I can present to my players to show where they are without it having gaps on the edges, essentially. Without it suddenly at the end of the map having an open space where there should be a building. I kind of had to do that in my 5th edition game, but that game wasn't being streamed, so I didn't mind so much. This map I do want to work properly because it is going out on stream. Let's hide my battle grid, because I don't need my battle grid at the moment. And make sure we've got that saved. I'm actually going to take a bit of a break there. Let's see, that's 2 3/4 hours. Yeah, I think I am going to take a break rather than stop the stream. I'm going to give myself a few minutes to grab a snack and a bio break, and then I will come back. So hopefully you will still be here, and I will see you again soon.